In the heart of Montana's endless plains, where the sky stretched wide enough to hold him and streams and his sorrows, Jake Harlan stood alone at the altar of a weather-clabbered chapel. His boots, scuffed despite a morning's polish, scraped softly against the worn floor as he adjusted his BOLO tie, the weight of the moment pressing harder than the July sun outside. The pews held a smattering of faces, ranch hands, cousins, old friends from the feed store, all watching him with pity veiled as patience. His fiancée, Clara, had left a voicemail at dawn, "Jake, I can't. I'm sorry." No warning, no fight, just her voice, thin and final, crackling through his old flip phone. At 40, with a laugh carved from grit, losing his mother cancer, his pot to the bottle, and his youth to the relentless grind of the ranch, Jake had believed Clara was his second chance. Now, as the preacher coughed awkwardly and the organist fidgeted, he stood there, a solitary cowboy, the altar as empty as his future. The chapel's double doors groaned open, spilling sunlight across the aisle, and every head swiveled. Jackie's heart stuttered, half expecting Clara's silhouette. Instead, a woman in faded jeans and a plaid shirt stepped in, clutching a handful of scraggly wildflowers, black-eyed Susans and clover, roots dangling like afterthoughts. She was no local, her city-soft hands and the faint New York lilt in her voice, when she spoke, gave her away. "I'm so sorry," she said, striding toward Jake with a stranger's boldness, her hazel eyes steady with something like compassion. "I was driving by, saw the crowd. Thought maybe someone needed a hand." The guests whispered, confusion rippling through the pews. Who was she? A thrifty? A nosy tourist? Jake, caught between embarrassment and curiosity, managed a tight smile. "Ma'am, this was supposed to be my wedding. Didn't they quite pan out?" Her name was Lila, as they learned later, and she didn't hesitate. "Well," she said, pressing the flowers into his hands, "no wedding's complete without a bouquet. They's here for you. Susan's mean courage, you know." The gesture was absurd, yet it pierced him, a stranger's kindness cutting through his public shame like a blade through rope. The congregation softened, a few clapped lightly, unsure but moved. Jake held the flowers, their earthy scent grounding him, and felt a flicker of warmth he hadn't known he could still feel. Who was this woman, stepping into his unraveling life with no agenda but to help? Over pie at the roadside diner, Lila shared her story. She was 36, a former librarian from Albany, fleeing a life that had collapsed like a bad hand of cards. A cheating husband, a pink slip from her job, a rented apartment she could no longer afford. She'd packed her hatchback and driven west, chasing nothing but open road. "I saw the chapel, the cars," she said, sipping black coffee. "Felt like a sign. I've been the one left behind before. Didn't they want anyone else feeling that alone?" Jake, usually tight-lipped, found himself talking about Clara's laugh, how she'd loved line dancing, how they carved their initials into the barn door. "Thought we'd build a life," he said, voice low. "Guess I misread the signs." Lila leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "Or maybe the signs led you here, to something new. Sometimes kindness from a stranger is what opens the door." Hake offered her a place to crash when the diner closed, his ranch just a few miles out. It wasn't a charity, more a need to keep her near, to hold on to the spark she'd ignited. Lila agreed, and they drove through the dusk, the truck's headlights slicing through the sagebrush. His ranch was a patchwork of struggle, 300 acres, a herd of scrappy cattle, a house with a sagging porch. "This is it," Jake said, almost apologetic. Lila stepped out, breathing in the sharp scent of pine and dust. "It's honest," she said. "More than I can say for most places I've been." Days passed, and Lila stayed. A sudden hailstorm turned the roads to sludge, giving her an excuse to linger. She wasn't the one for idleness, helping Jake mend a gate, hauling feed, even laughing when a calf knocked her into the mud. One morning, as they rode horses along the ridge, Lila spotted a colt, barely a year old, tangled in barbed wire by the creek. Its leg was bloodied, eyes wild with fear. Without a word, she slid off her horse, approaching slow and steady, humming softly until the colt calmed. Jake watched, awestruck, as she cut it free, her hands gentle but sure, wrapping the wound with a strip torn from her own shirt. "You're natural," he said later, as they nursed the colt in the barn. Lila shrugged. "Just can't stand seeing something hurt and doing nothing." That night, over stew and cornbread, Jake asked, "Why go out of your way?" For me, for that cold, bad in it for you? Lila's smile was small but real. Years ago, when my marriage fell apart, a librarian I barely knew let me cry in her office. Got me a book on starting over. That one act, it saved me. Kindness isn't just a gift, it's a chain. You pass it on, and it grows. Her words hit Jake like a revelation. Eddie spent years building walls, thinking self-reliance was strength. But Lila's selflessness, her willingness to step into a stranger's pain, showed him strength could be soft, though. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw you online, big brother. I'm sorry. Can we talk? It was his sister, Maggie, estranged for a decade after a fight over their past will. She'd seen a local news story about the cowboy left at the altar, a grainy photo of Lila handing Jake the flowers, her face radiant with empathy. The story had spread, shared across social media with captions about human goodness. Maggie, holed up in Idaho, saw it and felt a pang of regret. That woman's smile reminded me what family's supposed to feel like, she wrote. Jack's throat tightened as he read the words aloud to Lila. She squeezed his hand, and in that moment, he understood. Her act of kindness hadn't just saved his wedding day, it had rippled out, pulling his family back together. Lila's presence became a catalyst. Neighbors started dropping by, drawn by the story, offering hay or tools to fix up the ranch. Jake, inspired, opened his land for community potlucks, where folks swapped stories of their own second chances. Lila stayed on, her cross-country escape forgotten. One starlit night, as they sat on the porch, Jake confessed, "You walked in that chapel and turned my world right side up." Lila's eyes shimmered. "You gave me a place to belong, Jake. That's no small thing." Their kiss was tentative, a promise of something neither had dared hope for. The emotional peak came months later. Lila got an email. Her ex, moved by the same viral story, offered to return half their shared savings, money she'd thought was gone forever. "You showed me what decency looks like," he wrote. Instead of keeping it, Lila donated it to the ranch, turning it into a haven for injured animals and struggling locals. Jack's sister moved back, helping run the place, her own wounds healing alongside the community's. The ranch bloomed, literally, with Lila's wildflower patches, and figuratively, as a beacon of hope. At their own wedding, a year later in that same chapel, Jake looked at Lila, her dress simple, her smile unwavering. The cowboy who'd once stood alone now knew, one act of kindness could rewrite a life. Lila's flowers, given without expectation, had sparked a chain of generosity, proving that in America's heartland or anywhere else, humanity's strength lies in its capacity to care. As they danced under the Montana stars, the world felt whole, each selfless act a stitch in the fabric of a better tomorrow.